Okay, guys, here we are, week 6, rapidly running out of our 8-week course here, right? So we have this week and next week, and then week 8 is just the final exam. All right, so what we've got this week is last week we dealt with civil liberties in Congress. This week we're dealing with civil rights in the court. And when I closed out the discussion, I made a mention there's a difference between civil liberties and civil rights, okay? Civil liberties are our first 10 amendments, think of it like that, our Bill of Rights, that protect us from the government, keep the government out of our lives. Where civil rights, we ask the government to come in because we're asking the government to protect us from discrimination, unreasonable discrimination, okay? So this week, what I asked you to do in the discussion is I want you to look, and I want you to obviously define civil rights and give me some examples of civil rights. I want you to show me how the court has interpreted what civil rights are over the years. It's evolved over the years. And then I want you to think about why the nomination process of Supreme Court judges is so controversial. Okay, and I think there's a big connection here, not so much just to civil rights, but social issues in general. Okay, so there's really two things we're dealing with in the discussion. One is, what are civil rights? How has the court interpreted civil rights over time? And the second thing is, why has the Supreme Court nomination process become so confrontational, become so problematic? Okay, so you want to think about that in terms of judicial review and so forth. Okay, think about that, because the last two have been just downright nasty. Really, when it all said, well, I guess the Coney Barrett wasn't so bad. I mean, there was a lot of play, but the Kavanaugh one, right, was just ugly, and then the Merrick Garland one before then, and the argument over that, the Merrick Garland nomination and so forth, and it was messy, to say the least. And there's some history of how it's become more contentious over time. So, well, I want you to think about that and kind of think about why that's going on. Okay, and it's a separate thing. I don't think we can necessarily say, oh, in fact, I would argue, I don't think you can make the argument that it's a civil rights issue that's causing the contention. So don't think I'm trying to conflate those two, because I'm not. What I'm asking you to do is to define civil rights and show how the court has interpreted those over time. And then on a separate issue, look at the confirmation process on the court and think about why it's become so contentious, okay? In the paper then we have this week, all right, I ask you to read the court's opinion in Plessy v. Ferguson, and then I ask you to read Dr. King's speech, okay? And Dr. King is a classic piece of literature that everybody should read. I mean, it's excellent. And what I want you to do is I want you to look at Plessy, and I want you to explain what was the court's logic in Plessy, because there's a logic to it. We don't have to agree with it, but this was the court's logic. So what was the court's logic in Plessy? Okay, here's what they came up with, and here's how they reached that conclusion. And make sure you're pulling things right out of the document, all right? That's something we got to be better at. Your thinking is very good, and your interpretation skills are quite good, but we need specific examples from the document to support our position on these things. So anyway, so the Plessy, you got to look at that and say, okay, here's what they came up with. Okay, here's what their logic for why they came to it. Then look at Dr. King, all right, and what he wrote, and then say, okay, how would Dr. King respond to Plessy? Using pieces from the document, okay, Dr. King wrote, what's in there that you could say, Dr. King would say to the court this? How would he refute their claims? How would he say, that's a bad idea, I disagree, and here's why this is a bad idea? Okay, so then we have our usual quiz. So that's what we have this week, okay? So think about the discussion in two parts. Civil rights, how has the court interpreted them over time? Part 2, why has the nomination process of Supreme Court justices become so controversial, contentious maybe, right? And then in our writing assignment, we're looking at Plessy and then the writing of Dr. King. What was the logic of the court in Plessy, and how would Dr. King answer them? Okay, and again, make sure that you're using specific quotes, taking things right from those documents and putting in the paper to support your position and interpretation, okay? And like always, if you have any questions, never hesitate to contact me. I'm always here. Alrighty, bye now.